Eric's text was still lit on my screen as I pushed the door into the diner. I'm stuck at work. I hadn't even cleared the notification when the server looked at me and said, in the same soft tone you'd use to announce they were out of something, he's at table 5 with his fiancée. I let out a small breath. No embarrassment, no anger. It felt like hearing the ending of a story I'd known for a long time. I looked up. The diner light slid across the stainless steel table, cold and flat. Exactly how I felt in that moment. To understand this part, you'd have to go back a few months. I'm Vivian. I do graphic design for a small studio downtown. The job forces you to see details, a line off by a few pixels, a color that shouldn't be there, a bit of empty space in the wrong spot. I'm used to noticing things people try to hide, unless the one hiding them is my husband. Eric was a project manager at a mid-sized tech company. He always looked a little too put together. Flat shirt, flat words, flat smile. He knew exactly where to stand to look like a man with direction. At company parties, he talked with that calm, confident tone, leaning in just enough to seem ready with a solution to anything. Anyone meeting him for the first time would think he was the type to shoot straight to the top floor. I used to think that was a good thing. Ambition wasn't a crime. Until that ambition needed a stage, and I started to feel like the backdrop. About 3 months ago, Eric started caring about his appearance more than usual. I remember one morning he checked himself in the mirror before leaving, fixing his collar for the 3rd time. "Big meeting?" I asked. "Not really, just want to look professional." His voice was normal, but his eyes shifted off to the side for a beat. I didn't think much of it. He was the type who wanted everything to look perfect. But then it kept happening. One night when we were getting ready for bed, he took a call. His voice softened in that way you only use with someone you want to impress. "Yes, I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." I asked, "Who was that?" "Andrew," he said too fast. "Just a coworker." I wasn't suspicious, but something in the way he spoke made me file it away in my head like a small note. Strange. Then came the last-minute overtime dinners. He'd come home late, a faint scent of women's perfume on his shirt, something he explained as the new coworker standing close when we exchanged documents. I didn't ask more. I didn't think of myself as the controlling wife. But there was this thin, thread-like feeling starting to pull around my wrist, light but there. One weekend evening, he walked in with a small box in his jacket pocket. I opened it with a simple hope, maybe a surprise gift. It was a diamond ring, small but clean. "Who'd you buy this for?" I said before I could stop myself. "A female client at the company, a reward for hitting a target." He said it with so much confidence that I felt like I was the one overthinking. I closed the box, set it in his hand, and went back to the kitchen. My heart didn't hurt, it just felt cold. A few weeks later, Eric said something that made me pay closer attention. "My boss is starting to notice me." "Because of the project?" I asked. "Yeah, partly." He looked off to the side. Anyway, his family really values stability. The way he stressed family made me pause, but he changed the subject so fast, I didn't have time to unpack it. It wasn't until he started asking me strange questions. If a man can give his wife a better life, how should she feel about that? Or, do you think someone has to look more trustworthy to move up? I just said, as long as it's real. Eric went quiet for a long time. Those were the first seeds of suspicion, little lines, small but intentional. I'm not naturally suspicious, but I do observe, and I could see he was starting to live like he was on 2 different stages. One with me, calm, familiar, and another with someone else, where he wanted to look like a man worth showing off. I knew I should have asked, but I don't like assuming the worst without proof. So I stayed quiet. My mistake wasn't trusting. My mistake was trusting for too long. Then something small happened, something that pushed all my doubts in a new direction. One evening, as Eric walked out the door, his phone lit up with a notification. He shoved it into his pocket fast, but I'd already caught 3 short letters. ALI. Not Andrew. Not anyone he'd ever mentioned from work. He smiled. "I'm heading to a meeting. I'll be late." That smile was too perfect, too forced. It wasn't a husband's smile walking out the door. It was a man about to step onto a stage. That small moment was the line. Not painful, just clear. And it led me to that night at the diner. The night the server looked at me like I was the last person to know the secret. The night I heard he's at table 5 with his fiancée. And I wasn't surprised anymore. It was just that the curtain had finally lifted. From the moment I saw those 3 letters ALI on Eric's screen, I stopped seeing his changes as odd. I saw them as signs, quiet, sharp. And the more I looked, the more I realized those signs had been there for a long time. I just hadn't paid attention to their weight. The distance started with very small things. Eric talked less, not because he was tired, but because he was choosing what to say. When I asked about work, he answered with clipped lines. You wouldn't understand my environment. Work stuff is complicated. His tone wasn't annoyed. It was cold, confident, and a little too gentle, like he was soothing a child who asked too many questions. I wasn't hurt, but answers like that were his way of creating distance he thought I wouldn't notice. Then he started turning his phone off at night. The first time I called, it went straight to busy. The second time, it was powered off. The third time, he texted 2 hours later. Emergency meeting. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Didn't reply. Didn't ask. The feeling wasn't suspicion. It was like seeing a crease in fabric that should be flat. You only need to look closely to see it. There were days when I got home earlier than he did, and on those days, I noticed more than usual. For example, the way he fixed his hair in the mirror. He never took that long before, but now, every time he was about to work late, he stood in front of the mirror for almost a full minute, straightening his collar, adjusting his hair, then checking himself one more time before leaving. He wanted to look polished, not for me, or the receipt in his jacket pocket. One evening, while gathering clothes for the laundry, a slip of paper fell to the floor. A restaurant in Midtown. Expensive wine. 2 entrees. I asked lightly, who did you eat with? A male coworker. The table next to us was loud. They probably mixed up the wine order. He said it fast. Very natural. I didn't look at him. I set the receipt on the table, folded it neatly and put it in a drawer. What I saw was this. Someone who's lying isn't always frantic. Sometimes they're calmer than usual. Then there was the diamond ring in his desk drawer. The kind of ring that, if it were truly a gift for a female client, the company would have handled. He wouldn't need to pay for it himself. Client gift, he repeated. Didn't blink. The way he talked about it didn't sound like explaining. It sounded like a line he'd rehearsed. Each of these things wasn't proof, but they were signs. By the time Eric asked me to put a loan in my name, the outline of the picture finally started to show. He sat across from me at the dining table, his hands laced together. I need a loan to prove financial capability. The company's considering me for a new position, but I've hit my limit. Just this once, could you sign for it? I looked at him for a few seconds. Why do you need to prove financial capability for a promotion? Internal process, you wouldn't understand. Another, you wouldn't understand. But this time I didn't let it slide. I held on to it. He kept talking about the future, about doors opening, about how a leader needs to show financial responsibility. All of it sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. I signed. Not because I was foolish, but because I still thought I was helping an ambitious husband. I just didn't know that ambition had no place for me. Later, that loan contract became the sharpest blade I'd ever place on table 5. But when I signed it, I didn't see a blade. I only saw my signature next to his. In the days after that, Eric became unusually gentle. Not with me, with someone on the phone. I heard his voice once when he was standing on the balcony. Yeah, I understand. I'll try harder. Getting to meet him is a blessing for me. His voice dropped low, soft, a little shaky, like someone trying hard to impress. When he came back inside, I looked at him. Who were you talking to? He paused for one beat. Andrew. Just one beat. Thin. But someone in design like me is used to noticing the smallest misalignment. Andrew didn't match the tone he'd just used. From that moment, I started seeing patterns line up. He asked me about how wealthy people see someone who wants to rise. He told work stories, but always slipped in lines like, some families upstairs value stability more. He quietly compared us to couples who dress well, know how to show up. I heard all of it. I didn't react. The truth was he wasn't talking to me. He was practicing what to say to someone else, using me as the stand-in. Then came the night I saw the strange message. Eric left his phone on the table while he showered. The screen lit up. I didn't try to read it, but the line was too clear. My dad likes you. Thank you for tonight. No emoji. Nothing over the top. Formal, the way someone writes when the relationship is serious. I didn't touch the phone. I just looked for a few seconds. Every earlier sign lined up in my mind like pins forming a clean, continuous line. Eric walked out with wet hair and a towel. He saw the screen. In half a second, his face changed. He grabbed the phone. Coworker. Send it to the wrong person. Don't think about it. His voice was too quick and too soft, not the voice of someone telling the truth. I sat down, said nothing. What I felt wasn't hurt. It was confirmation. From that moment on, I knew I needed to look closer. Not with jealousy, not with noise, with the clarity of someone who's connected enough signs to know what waits at the end. I didn't confront him. I just started watching, quiet, slow, sharp. Because sometimes to see a person clearly, you have to let them perform. And Eric was giving a very complete performance. I didn't ask Eric about the strange message, and I didn't ask about the person named Ali. The best liars aren't the ones who speak smoothly. They're the ones who think you won't check, and Eric was sure I wouldn't check. That night, he left the house earlier than usual. Meeting with a client, he said. The shirt he chose was the kind he only wore when he wanted to impress. His cologne was stronger too, the one he claimed a male coworker sprayed on him as a joke. I just nodded. Then watched from the window as he drove off straight toward Midtown. I knew his car's GPS was synced to an app we both had. He thought I never opened it. He was right. Until that night. The red dot stopped at an upscale restaurant in an area Eric once said was too far for him to ever swing by. I grabbed my keys, pulled on a coat, and left the house. Not hurried, not shaking, just taking the next step toward what I needed to see with my own eyes. When I walked into the restaurant, a soft smell of wine hung in the air. The space was warm, the yellow lights coating the tables like a thin wash of paint. I stood still for a few seconds, letting my eyes adjust. A server walked over. "I'm waiting for my husband," I said simply. He glanced down at the phone in my hand. The screen still showed the message, "I'm stuck at work." And right then, the server's face shifted, very slightly, but I saw it. "He's at table 5, he said. "With who?" I asked, my voice so calm that even I could hear the cold in it. He bowed his head a little. "With his fiancée." No one prepares you for that line. No one teaches you how to breathe after hearing it. But I didn't need preparation, because I already knew. This was just confirmation. I didn't walk straight to table 5. I wanted to see from a distance first, to really look at the man I had shared a life with. Table 5 was tucked in the back corner, a little away from the walkway. Eric sat with his back to me, his head tilted slightly to the left, the way he only tilted it when he wanted to look relaxed. I hadn't seen him smile like that in a long time. Wide but controlled, like he was trying to seem warm while still keeping a polished image. Across from him was a young woman with long hair and bright eyes. Alina. I recognized her the moment I saw the ring on her hand, a ring almost identical to the one I'd found in his drawer. She turned her hand slightly, as if showing off the way the stone caught the light. And Eric looked at her with the eyes of a man being evaluated. They looked like they'd known each other a long time. They moved like a couple who understood exactly where they stood in each other's lives. And more than that, they moved like a couple with a promised future. That scene didn't hurt me. It clarified everything. Eric hadn't built a double life out of love. He'd built it out of strategy. I stood there watching them, and every piece fell into place. Eric had said, "The chairman's family values stability." Eric had said, "This could be my chance to move up." Eric had asked me what wealthy people want to see in a man with direction. None of that was for me. Those were lines he practiced on me. And Alina, the daughter of his company's chairman. Fiancée. Now everything was too clear. Eric was getting ready to marry her so he could step into that powerful family. And our marriage? A shadow. A past marker he didn't want anyone to know about. A phase on haven't wrapped up yet. Like he once told someone, probably Alina. The loan I signed for him? The money he bragged about to her family, using it to show he was stable, responsible, capable of taking care of his future wife. I paid for him to buy status. He used me as the down payment for his future. And the moment I understood that, I didn't see him as my husband anymore. Just a man willing to trade anything for a seat at the right table. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to table 5. My heels on the floor made a steady rhythm, like my heartbeat. Not fast, not shaky. Eric didn't turn around right away. Alina saw me first. She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to place whether she'd met me before. I stood beside the table. Eric turned, saw me, and the color drained from his face. Not because of guilt, because of fear. "Vivienne, you..." "I'm not here to talk," I cut in. My voice was firm, not loud, but enough to make the table next to us pause. I set a neat stack of papers on the table. The loan contract in my name, bank statements showing the money transferred to Eric. I looked straight at Alina. If you're his fiancée, you should know you're investing in a man who lives off his wife's signature. No anger, no sarcasm, just truth, sharp enough. Alina looked at the papers, then at Eric. Her eyes dropped as if she'd just realized she'd been standing in the wrong place in this story. She didn't ask anything. Maybe she didn't dare. Eric shot up from his seat. She's lying. It's an internal transaction, I can explain. I looked at him. Just looked. Cold like the stainless steel tabletop in this restaurant. Eric swallowed the rest of his sentence as if it got stuck in his throat. The server stood not far away. He understood what was happening. I saw him look at Eric with a familiar expression. The look of someone who's just realized his role in a story he never asked to be part of. A witness. I didn't need volume. Truth spreads on its own. Like a hairline crack in a mirror, it starts in one spot and then runs wide, unstoppable. No one in the restaurant knew who I was. No one knew who Eric was. But everyone knew one thing. Clear as day. Someone had just been exposed. Right where he thought he was shining. I didn't sit down. I didn't ask a single question. I didn't need to hear an explanation. I just pulled my hand back, straightened my coat and said, "You should finish your dinner. She deserves the real story." Then I turned away. I could feel Alina's eyes on my back. Not jealous. Clear. Eric lost his position, right there at table 5, in front of the exact person he'd spent half a year performing for. And the irony was, I didn't have to destroy anything. I just brought the truth to the place it belonged. Alina looked at the stack of papers I'd left in front of her for a few more seconds. Then, without a word, she stood up. Her chair slid softly across the floor, just loud enough to make the nearby tables look over. She didn't look at Eric. She didn't ask him a single question. She just grabbed her bag and walked away. Straight, quick, decisive. The kind of walk someone takes when they've realized they were being used as a prop. Eric reached toward her. "Alina, wait." But she was already out of reach. The only thing left on the table was her napkin, folded so neatly it looked like a decision that had just been signed. Eric's phone buzzed. The screen lit up with the name Mr. Hale, Alina's father, the chairman of his company. He looked at the call the way someone looks at a verdict. I heard him answer in a voice so small only those closest could catch it. "Yes, I understand. I'll come in." Then he set the phone on the table, his hand shaking just enough to tilt the glass beside him. He turned to me. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a man confident in his climb up the ladder. They were the eyes of someone who just lost the map in a dark tunnel. He reached out, trying to touch my sleeve. "Vivienne, we need to talk. You're misunderstanding." I stepped back. Very small. But enough. I didn't need to say anything. That distance said it for me. He no longer had the right to touch me. I turned to leave. Eric scrambled up after me. "You can't just walk out. We're married. You have to give me a chance to explain." I stopped. One beat. Then turned my head just slightly, enough to see him but not enough to let him feel like I was engaging. "I'll send the divorce papers tomorrow." My voice was low, calm, no tremor at all. The words dropped like a stone into still water. No ripples, just a straight fall to the bottom. Eric's face went pale. "Vivienne, you can't be serious." I walked out of the restaurant. No reply. I didn't need to say more. The one who talks the most is always the one losing. I hadn't even touched the front door when Eric came running after me. "Vivienne, wait." But this time he wasn't running because he loved me. He was running because he was afraid. Afraid of losing his position, his image, the life he'd spent months constructing. His footsteps behind me were louder than the traffic on the street. "You're destroying my life." I almost laughed when I heard that. Not because it was funny, but because it revealed him more clearly than any evidence ever could. In his mind, his life had always been the center. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see his face to know what it looked like. The people walking into the restaurant caught the door at the same moment and saw him. The look of someone watching a man lose control. No one stopped me. No one defended him. The truth was already on my side without me saying another word. As I stepped down the restaurant's front steps, Eric's voice grew faint. Not because he stopped calling, but because I no longer heard him. That night, when I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, logged into my bank account. A few steps, simple, clear. I submitted a request to cancel all authorizations tied to the loan I'd signed for Eric. My hand didn't shake. I didn't feel like I was doing something huge. I was just taking back what had always been mine. The confirmation email arrived within seconds. A small green line. "Your request has been processed." I leaned back in my chair. Not tired, just aware that the air in the room felt lighter. I opened a new tab and typed in the address of the law office I'd saved back when we bought the house. Tomorrow, I'd tell the story. No embellishing, no defending, just stating the truth. And the funny thing is, the simpler the truth is, the more it hurts the one who's wrong. When I closed the laptop, I felt something very clear. I wasn't stuck in Eric's story anymore. That story had collapsed on its own without me having to push. People think revenge is yelling, breaking things, or some dramatic comeback. But real revenge, the cold kind, doesn't make noise. It only needs one paper placed on the right table, one sentence said to the right person, and one step taken at the right moment. Eric lost everything not because I did something cruel. He lost because he built his life on a lie, and I just turned the light on. I stood up and hung my coat on the hook. The house felt strangely quiet, like a room after a storm has passed, but without any broken pieces, just air that had changed. I closed the office door and heard a soft click. That's how an old chapter ends. Not loud, not painful, just final. I didn't know where Eric was at that moment. Maybe still at the restaurant, explaining in desperation. Maybe being called into Alina's father's office to hear things he didn't want to hear. Maybe staring at the future he traded everything for and seeing a void. I didn't care. What mattered was that I finally chose myself. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I turned off the living room lights and looked around the house one last time that night. Freedom isn't a scream. Freedom is when you walk away without carrying any piece of someone who used you. And that night, I was free. The first message I got the next morning wasn't from Eric. It was from one of his former coworkers. He's been suspended. They're in an emergency meeting with the board. I set my phone down. Not happy, not sad, just steady. What belongs to him finds its way to him. I don't have to move a finger. An hour later, I got a second message, this time from a friend of Alina's, someone who had probably heard the story from her directly. Wedding's off. Her family wants to cut ties. I read the message and locked my screen. Not surprised. A powerful family would never accept a man who built his future on a loan in his ex-wife's name. They need clean. Eric wasn't clean. By the afternoon, his company released an internal memo. Eric was suspended pending investigation for knowingly concealing personal information that affects the organization's image. They didn't write the details, but everyone understood. In just a few hours, his name shifted from praise, ambitious, driven, to whispers of a two-faced man who used women. A career doesn't crumble from a grand scandal. It crumbles from a truth that's small but razor-sharp. As for me, after meeting with the lawyer, I walked out of the office feeling as light as if I'd returned something that never belonged to me. Divorce wasn't a victory. It was an exit. I rented an apartment smaller than the old house, but brighter. Morning light hit the walls like a fresh coat of paint. No trace of Eric here. No shadow of the life before. I bought exactly 3 things: a light wood desk, a soft rug, and a small plant by the window. Everything else, I left empty. Not because I lacked anything, but because I wanted to see the space, to remind myself I no longer had to make room for anyone else. Some nights I sat alone, looking out at the row of buildings in the distance. Not sad, not nostalgic. I hadn't lost anything. I'd only let go of what wasn't worth keeping. And strangely, the quiet didn't feel unfamiliar. It felt like the moment you finally cut a tangled string that's been digging into your skin for too long. Light, clean, right on time. Eric called a few times. I didn't pick up. Not to punish him, but because there was no reason to listen anymore. People don't fall apart from one big shock. They fall when they're finally forced to face themselves without disguise. And Eric was staring at his real portrait. A portrait I didn't need to add a single line to. On my last day clearing out the old office, I suddenly remembered him at table 5. The calculated smile, the eyes waiting for approval, the posture of a man who thought he'd touched a power bigger than himself. I stood still for a few seconds, then closed the door softly. No attachment, no second thoughts. The day he was exposed, I didn't beat him. I just took back what was mine. The rest, he collapsed on his own. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't holding someone in place, but walking away when the truth is already too clear. You don't lose by leaving, you just choose yourself again. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening all the way through. Have you ever met someone like Eric? Someone more afraid of being exposed than of hurting you? Share in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to support the channel with a subscribe and a like.